I still hear that scream every night. Not my own, not my wife's, but my son's, echoing through fire. That sound didn't come from pain. It came from disbelief, the kind a child makes when the world betrays him and nobody runs fast enough. He screamed once, then never again. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. I was 3 streets away when it happened. My son, Evan, had just called to tell me he'd forgotten his lunch. He laughed about it, said he'd borrow something from his best friend. 5 minutes later, smoke from his school gate was rising like a black flag in the winter air. When I turned that corner, I knew this wasn't just another accident. The fire wasn't spreading like chaos. It burned like a message. People stood frozen, teachers shouting, sirens. And there, in the middle of the road, my boy, skin blistered, clothes half melted, lying next to the curb where someone poured gasoline. I fell to my knees before anyone could stop me. Someone whispered, "Iron vultures, the gang did it again." No, that wasn't possible. I left that kind of world years ago. I grabbed his hand, still warm, trembling. His eyes fought to focus on me. "Dad, it hurts." And then, his lips turned heavy, like the words couldn't climb out anymore. Everything I had become, a father, a husband, a quiet man, burned with him. Hours later, the hospital smelled of chemicals and grief. The doctors tried everything. I just sat there, watching a line on the monitor flatten out in front of me. My wife, Lila, was shaking next to me, whispering questions I couldn't answer. Who would do that? Why our son? Why in daylight? The detective, Sergeant Harper, said they'd catch them soon. We already have a suspect. Teenagers, most from a local gang. I didn't let her finish. I didn't care about soon, because soon doesn't fix ashes. When they left the room, I pulled out my old military wallet, something I hadn't touched since retirement. Inside it was a patch, black OPS, Unit 9, Operative Grant Taylor. 26 years. 43 missions, and every ghost still alive inside those numbers. I told myself I'd buried that part forever, but grief does things to men like me. It digs graves, and then whispers, "Fill them again." That night, reporters swarmed the school gates. Kids crying, parents clutching their children tighter. I stood there alone among flashing lights. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I'd been trained to feel nothing during explosions, betrayals, even the wailing of dying comrades. But this broke the code. The police chalked out the burn trail. You could see exactly how they did it. Corner by the fence, fuel trail to the curb, lighter tossed from the bike. Precise. Intentional. Which meant one thing, someone taught them this. So I stayed after everyone left. When the lights went out, I crouched down where my son's body had been and noticed something half buried in the gravel. A burned metal tag. Half melted. I wiped off the ash. Not police issue. Not gang jewelry. It was a dog tag. And not mine. My stomach nodded. That kind of tag only comes from one place. The kind of missions nobody talks about. Iron vultures might be the front. But this was military at its roots. When I reached home, Lila was sitting on the edge of our bed, holding Evan's photo. Her eyes were red, but there was something else, not just grief, but fear. The kind that comes when you've seen this kind of violence before. I asked softly, "Lila, you ever heard that name before? Iron vultures?" She didn't answer right away, just stared at me, clutching the photo tighter. "They're just kids from the city, right? Please, Grant, don't start something again." Again. That one word told me everything she didn't say. I sat across from her. "What do you mean again?" She looked away. "You know what I mean." "No, I didn't. Not anymore." She turned her face to the window. "You promised your war was over." I studied her reflection, trembling lips. Eyes that didn't meet mine once. Silence that spoke louder than truth. My instincts screamed. This wasn't just about a gang. Something bigger had crawled out of my past and found my son. In the middle of the night, while she finally slept, I opened the garage and dug through boxes, things she thought I destroyed years ago. My weapons were gone, but my memories weren't. Files, names, operations. Every covert mission I ran from 96 to 2022. And there it was, one name connected to my last mission before retirement. Mason Creed. A man I used to call brother. He was declared Kia after we burned his location in an enemy desert base, but we never found the body. I had written the final report myself. A simple line, body confirmed. No recovery required. I lied that day, because sometimes you have to bury men before they bury you. Now the question hung in my head. If Mason Creed was alive, what was he doing near my son's school? The next morning, Sergeant Harper returned. Mr. Taylor, we found one of the attackers' bikes near a warehouse. Same gang tag. We're checking prints. I nodded, pretending to listen. Behind her words, I heard the same bureaucratic uselessness I'd seen overseas. I shook her hand, thanked her, closed the door, and locked it behind her. This wasn't about gang violence anymore. This was a message, a challenge. I went to my study, opened my old military laptop, and connected to an encrypted network I hadn't touched in years. Many of my old links were dead, except one. B. Wallace. Blake Wallace, my old recon partner, the kind of man who knew when explosions were political and when they were personal. The message I sent him was short. They took my boy. Same signature as 03 Riyadh. Need eyes on Mason Creed, fast. Within hours, Blake replied with a phone number and one line. You're not done yet, ghost. By evening, I stood at Evan's room door. His bed still messy. His drawings of soldiers taped to the wall. He always said he wanted to be like me one day. He didn't know what that meant. I sat on his bed and held one of his notebooks. Inside, I found something that turned my pulse cold. A folded note, like something passed between kids. It said, your dad doesn't scare them anymore. They said they'll teach him a lesson he'll never forget. Underneath it, letters drawn like a mark. 4. Iron vultures. They knew exactly who I was, and they wanted me to suffer. The news ran the story on repeat, showing photos of Evan's school, the crime scene, the chaos. I sat watching it in darkness. My reflection on the TV looked like a ghost, a man who once believed he could live quietly after a life of war. They were wrong. Sometimes you have to resurrect the monster they created to burn down the world that killed your child. Perfect. I'll keep every scene grounded, emotionally real, and fully logical while using natural dialogue with proper punctuation for emotion and flow. We'll stay in Grant's voice, maintaining suspense, heartbreak, and character tension throughout. Here's the continuation. The next morning, the world felt quiet. Too quiet, like it knew something I didn't. I hadn't slept. The smell of smoke still clung to my clothes no matter how many times I showered. Every time water hit my skin, I could almost hear Evan calling my name again. Lila sat at the kitchen table, untouched coffee in front of her. Her eyes were hollow, mascara faintly smeared under the red. She whispered. The detective called. They found one of the boys. He's in custody. I looked at her, waiting for her to say something that would sound like hope. But her next words cut through me. They think it was a mistake. A mistake, I said, voice trembling. You think kids accidentally douse someone in gasoline and set them on fire? She flinched at my tone, but didn't speak. Instead, she pushed a small envelope across the table. This came last night. It was taped to the mailbox. I picked it up carefully. Inside was a photograph, a blurry shot of me standing at Evan's graveside from only hours before. On the back, written in black marker, "Welcome back, ghost." My thumb froze on the paper. Only a few people ever called me that. Lila's voice broke. What does that mean, Grant? Who sent it? I swallowed hard. Someone who should have stayed buried. Later that day, I met Blake at an abandoned train yard on the city's edge. He'd aged, but that same look stayed in his eyes, the kind soldiers keep when they've seen too many body bags. He lit a cigarette. You should have called sooner. I thought I was out. He exhaled, shaking his head. We're never out. You were the clean one, remember? They hated that. Who's that? I asked. He looked at me for a long second. like testing if I could handle the truth. You remember Mason Creed? My blood turned cold. He died. Guess not that dead. Blake pulled a thin folder from under his coat and tossed it on the hood of my truck. Inside were surveillance photos. Mason alive, leaner, scars across his jaw, eyes meaner than I remembered. He was wearing a private security badge with a company named Red Axis Global. I looked up sharply. That's a defense firm. Government contracts, paramilitary operations, and gang cover-ups, Blake said. Rumor is, he uses street gangs as smokescreens for smaller ops, trafficking, recon, freelance hits. That Iron Vulture's crew? Trained by one of his errand boys. Why my son? Because you ghosted him in '03. Left him to die? Maybe he found your file. Maybe your name triggered something nasty. Mason never forgot anything. I thought of the dog tag I found at the school. Blake, I said quietly. He left that tag in the ashes. He wanted me to see it. Blake's expression hardened. Then you already know this isn't over. When I returned home, Lila was sitting in the living room with the news on mute. The image of Evan's school filled the screen. She turned to me. Where did you go? Out, I said, removing my jacket. Out where? Grant, people are watching. Those men could still be. Those men are ghosts from my past. I cut in. And now they've touched my son. Her eyes welled up. You promised me that life was gone. I promised to protect this family. And I failed once. Never again. She stood up, voice shaking. You think violence fixes this? It's why they came back in the first place. That stopped me. I stared at her, slow and deliberate. What did you just say? She froze, realizing too late that her words gave something away. I took a step forward. How do you know why they came back? She turned away. I didn't mean, Lila, look at me. My tone dropped, quiet, cold, dangerous. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Mason called me months ago. He said he needed to talk to you, that people were after him. He sounded desperate, and I thought, you thought what? That you'd help the man I betrayed and not tell me. Her voice cracked. I didn't think he'd actually do something. I stared at her, stunned by the naivety or maybe denial. You gave him a link, didn't you? My address, my phone, something from you. Mason couldn't find me otherwise. I just wanted to keep us safe, she whispered. Safe. I laughed bitterly. You handed the wolf the map to our door. I left the house before I said something I'd regret. The sun was low, blood red against the clouds. I parked 2 miles away, gripping the steering wheel till my knuckles turned white. I needed proof before I acted. I called Blake again. Dig into Mason's communications. I need everything. He sighed. You're diving into a mess that ends in blood. I was born in blood, I said, and hung up. By midnight, Blake sent me an encrypted file. Inside were phone logs, messages between a Red Axis number and an unlisted private contact. The contact was registered under L. Taylor. My chest tightened. The message chain began 3 months ago. Mason, tell him we can bury the past, if he stays quiet. Lila, he already buried you. Mason, then I'll return the favor. Every muscle in my body went numb. I closed my eyes, feeling my pulse hammer behind them. It was never random. It was never about turf wars or gangs. Mason had used my family to draw me out, and my wife, whether by fear or guilt, had played right into his hands. At dawn, I drove back to the school. The crime scene tape flapped gently in the wind. I stood there where Evan fell, where my life split in half. A janitor nearby looked at me and said softly, They say a man came here last night, stood here for hours. Didn't say a word, just stared at the wall. Did you see his face? I asked. He nodded. Tall, clean scarred down here. He traced his jawline with his finger. Said something before he left, said, Tell the ghost I'm home. That was enough confirmation. Mason Creed wasn't hiding anymore. He was calling me out. I stared at the ground one last time where the ashes had been and lowered my voice. You chose the wrong child and the wrong father. A cold wind swept through, scattering dust across the pavement like smoke returning to air. This was no longer just grief. It was war, dressed in silence. By the third day, sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. Every breath I took carried the scent of burned rubber and gasoline, a shadow that followed me everywhere. My son was gone. My wife was lying to me. And the man I once saved on the battlefield had just declared war in my own city. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I wanted answers. The kind that come only when you listen carefully, like in combat, when silence tells you more than words. I drove across town to meet Blake in an old warehouse on the riverfront, half collapsed and reeking of oil. It used to be a shipping terminal. Now it was ghost territory. He was waiting near a workbench, a laptop glowing faint blue in the dark. He nodded when I walked in, eyes grim. I pulled the intel you asked for. You're not gonna like it. What did you find? Blake turned the laptop toward me. The screen showed surveillance stills, faces of men with iron vultures tattoos meeting with men in private security armor. Red Axis global logos on their sleeves. They weren't rogue teenagers. They were trained, disciplined. Creed's turning street gangs into soldiers, Blake said. He finances them, drills them, and uses them to smuggle weapons out of decommissioned bases. The kids think they're untouchable. He's building something, Grant. I stared at one photo frozen mid-frame. 3 men, hooded, carrying fuel cans near the school camera timestamped the morning Evan died. They were soldiers once, I murmured. He's teaching them military precision for playground killings. Blake leaned closer. He's mocking you. Every move, every letter. It's like he wants you to chase him. My jaw tightened. Then I'll give him exactly what he wants. When I got home, Lila was sitting on the couch, staring at the TV again. I could tell she hadn't moved since I left. Her voice cracked when she spoke. Where were you? Looking for the man who murdered our son. I told you the police. The police can't find men who don't exist in databases. I tossed a flash drive on the table. You still think this is random? She picked it up, her hands trembling. What is this? Footage. Mason. Red Axis. The gang. Your phone records. Her face drained of color. Grant, stop. Don't lie again. Tears filled her eyes. He said if I didn't answer his calls, something worse would happen. I was scared. You should have been scared of me. I shouted before I could stop myself. The room went silent. The kind that cuts deeper than any word. She looked down, then whispered, You've changed. No, I said, my voice low. I just stopped pretending to be normal. That night, I loaded the old duffel bag from the attic. It still smelled like iron and sand. Every weapon inside was dismantled, every tool meant for missions that weren't supposed to exist. My hands remembered each piece instinctively. The weight, the rhythm, the sound of precision locking into purpose. I slipped my knife back into its sheath. 26 years they taught me how to disappear, I whispered. Maybe that's how I'll start. I drove to the outskirts, where the iron vultures hung out. Abandoned parking lots, burned motels, and spray-painted bridges. I parked my car far enough that no camera would catch my plate. Midnight crawled slow. I followed 3 of them from a liquor store, watching from the shadows. They laughed as they walked under a flickering streetlight, tossing a lighter between them like a trophy. One of them bragged, You should have seen the old man's face. Bro dude was crying like we burned his soul. My blood went cold. I stepped out from the alley. They froze at the sound of my voice. You boys like playing with fire? The shortest one turned. Who the hell are you? I walked closer, the wind carrying my words like steel. Just a father. I moved before they could pull their knives. 2 steps, 1 disarm, pressure to the jaw, knee to the gut, a blur of training. The 3rd tried to run. I grabbed him by the collar and slammed him into the hood of a car. Where's Mason Creed? I growled. Who gave the order? I don't know. I swear, man. He paid us through some guy. Name. He spat blood. Colt. We call him Colt. He's ex-military, works for Red Axis. I let him drop and pulled a photo from my pocket, the burn dog tag. You ever seen this? The boy's eyes widened. That's Colt's. He wears it all the time. That was all I needed. I left them battered but breathing. I wasn't here for slaughter, not yet. I was hunting something deeper. By the time I got back in the car, my heartbeat was steady again. This was the calm that used to come before ambushes. I whispered to myself, "You started your war on a schoolyard, Creed. Now I'll finish it on your doorstep." At dawn, I met Blake again. He was tired, tapping through files on his phone. "You really stirred the streets. Word's out, you're hunting. I need Colt." Blake nodded. "Red Axis has a front building under a bogus logistics name. Crimson Way Freight, South Industrial Sector. I can get you schematics." "I don't need schematics," I said quietly. "I just need entry." He looked at me, uneasy. "You're planning something, aren't you?" "Just reconnaissance." "Right." He blew smoke from his cigarette and muttered, "Recon usually ends in blood when it's you." By evening, I was inside the freight compound's perimeter. Years of training turned every shadow into an ally. Security cameras swept slow, predictable arcs. The guards weren't disciplined, too relaxed. I slipped past them, into a row of shipping containers. Each one was marked with coded tags, Red Axis property. Inside one crate, I found what I didn't want to see: hundreds of small arms, NATO origin, scratched serials, all prepped for distribution. Weapons from military stockpiles, the kind only someone with clearance could move. And there, sitting on top of a crate, was a photo clipped under a bullet magnet. My wedding photo. Lila, Evan, and me, smiling. Below it, a single line scrawled in marker: "Your family built by lies, destroyed by truth." My stomach twisted. From somewhere behind me, a voice echoed, "You were always late, Ghost." I turned, gun drawn, but the place was empty. A speaker crackled in one of the containers, the voice crackling through distorted static. "We're just getting started, old friend. Keep digging. Maybe you'll find out what your wife never told you." The speakers cut off. For a moment, all I could hear was my own breathing. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was a hunt, orchestrated by a man who knew exactly how to draw pain like a map. And I was walking straight into it, step by step. Part 4. Betrayal. Under the same roof, I didn't go home right away. The wind coming off the river had turned cold, but I needed the quiet before walking back into that house. The image of our wedding photo nailed to ammunition crates kept replaying, every flicker of memory cutting deeper. When I finally parked outside, Lila's car was still in the driveway, lights on in the kitchen. For a moment I just sat there, watching the window. She was pacing, hands pressed over her face like someone waiting for news they already knew would ruin them. I walked in without saying a word. The smell of coffee and fear filled the air. She turned fast. "Grant, where were you?" The detective came again. I set a small scrap of paper on the counter. The ink was smeared, the writing in Mason's unmistakable hand. "He's not dead, Lila. He's been alive all these years, and he's here." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Mason? That's not possible." I locked eyes with her. "You've spoken to him." She flinched, stepping back. "No, don't lie. He's watching us. He left our photograph in one of his supply rooms." "You think that's coincidence?" Lila's breath hitched. "He said he just needed help." I didn't know what he was planning, I swear. He said, what did he say? That if you didn't pay attention, people would start dying. He said he needed you to see what loyalty costs. I stared at her in disbelief. "You believed him? You believed the man I left behind after he sold out a whole platoon for money?" Her tears came fast. "I was scared for us. He knew everything about you. Dates, missions, codes. He told me you killed innocent people." "I did my job," I said coldly. "And if I ever crossed the line, it was to keep you breathing." The room went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. She covered her mouth, sobbing softly. "Grant, I didn't think he'd hurt Evan. I thought if I answered his calls, if I listened, it would keep him away." I couldn't move. For years, I'd faced interrogations, missiles, betrayals in uniform. But this, standing in front of the woman I'd promised to trust, it broke something that combat never could. Later, I sat alone on the porch steps while the night settled around us. My mind kept circling the same questions. Mason wasn't trying to kill me right away. He wanted me to turn on her first. That's how he worked. Weaponize the heart before the bullets start flying. Blake's message buzzed on my phone. Tracked one of Mason's shipments. Moving through port midnight tomorrow. You in? I typed back. I'll be there. I didn't tell Lila. Inside, I found her asleep on the couch, clutching one of Evan's blankets. There was a strange ache watching her like that. Broken, terrified, guilty. I wanted to hate her. Instead, I just felt empty. The next night, the docks were dead quiet. The only light came from a half moon and a few scattered yard lamps. Blake crouched beside a stack of containers, night scope pressed to his eye. Shipment leaves in 30. Local gang muscle on site, he whispered. Through the lens, I saw them. The same Iron Vulture's kids loading crates into a black truck. Standing behind them was a tall man, face hidden under a hood, movements sharp, deliberate. That's Colt, Blake said. Mason's field handler. Let's move closer. We slipped around the far containers, keeping low. I could feel my pulse steadying into soldier rhythm. The closer we got, the clearer their voices became. Creed said burn everything left in the last house. Colt ordered. He wants no trace, just ashes. My heart froze. The last house. He was talking about mine. Before I could move, my boot scraped faintly across the gravel. Colt turned, raising his weapon. Contact. Gunfire cracked through the night. Blake shouted, cover. We dove behind a container as bullets tore through the metal. Sparks showered in the dark. I leaned out, fired twice. One round hit Colt's shoulder. He stumbled, cursing. You think you can hide behind ghosts, Taylor? He shouted. Creed's already inside your home. My stomach dropped. I bolted for the truck, ignoring Blake's yell behind me. Colt fired again, grazing my arm. The pain barely registered. I reached the exit, tires squealing against asphalt as I tore out of the port. The drive home felt endless. My hands shook on the wheel, not from fear, but fury. When I turned onto my street, I saw the flicker of orange against our living room curtains. Flames already creeping up the wall. I kicked the front door open. The heat hit hard. Lila. Her scream came from upstairs. I ran through the smoke, grabbed her arm, dragged her down the hall while debris rained from the ceiling. We burst into the front yard just as the second floor gave way behind us. She was coughing, tears cutting clean lines through the soot. I told you he wouldn't stop. The sirens were getting closer. I held her as she sobbed into my chest, the fire painting our faces in red light. I'll stop him, I said quietly, but not the way he expects. Before dawn, after the firefighters cleared the wreck, I found the melted remains of a small metal box near the ashes of our porch. Inside was another photograph, this time of Mason and a teenage Evan standing side by side, like a memory that never should have existed. Across the bottom was written, "Your family was mine first." The words cut deeper than any bullet ever could. I stood in the cold morning air, staring into the smoke where our home used to be, and whispered, "You want my attention, Creed? You've got it." The sky was turning gray. Somewhere out there, Mason Creed was smiling, thinking he'd won. He had no idea what kind of war he'd just reignited. The burned frame of our house still smoked when the sun came up. Every plank of wood was blackened, the smell of gasoline twisting in the air like poison. The fire department called it an intentional ignition. I called it a promise. Mason Creed wasn't hiding behind shadows anymore. He wanted me to burn too. Lila sat on the curb, wrapped in a blanket one of the neighbors had brought out. The look in her eyes was distant, hollow, as if she was somewhere else. Back in the moment, she realized how far the past had followed us. I handed her a water bottle. "You need to rest." She held it, but her fingers shook so badly she couldn't open it. "Where will we go?" "Somewhere they can't find you," I said. Her eyes lifted slowly. "They always find you, Grant." That might have been true once. But this time, I wasn't going to wait for them. By noon, I was in a safe house Blake kept outside the city, an old cabin surrounded by pine and silence. He had radio equipment, weapons, and maps spread across the floor like a command center. When I walked in, he didn't look up from his laptop. "Colt's dead," he said. "PD found him in the river an hour ago. Execution shot. Creed clears loose ends fast." I took a deep breath. So we moved faster. Blake pushed a folder toward me. "You're gonna need help." I reached out to some old names. The ones who still answer calls like this. I opened the folder. Inside were 3 profile sheets. Victor Hale, former demolitions expert, Ryder Brooks, infiltration and recon, and Colin Ward, sniper and logistics. All of them ghosts from operations that didn't exist on record. "They'll come?" I asked. "They already said yes," Blake replied. "You saved all their lives once. Guess they figured now's the time to repay it." A moment later, a pickup truck pulled up outside. The first to step through the door was Victor, big, scarred, carrying that same easy grin he always wore before a mission. "Well, hell," he said. "Never thought I'd see you back in uniform, Taylor. What's the target?" "Name's Mason Creed," I said. "He killed my son, burned my house. I don't care if he has an army. I'm taking him apart piece by piece." Ryder walked in behind him, thin and quiet as ever, his eyes flicking around the room, scanning windows, corners, exits. "Red Axis Global," he muttered. He used to run ops for them. "Heard they've gone private deep, training killers, moving stockpiles. If Creed's running that, he's got federal-grade stash." Colin gave a short laugh. "Then we bring the storm." For hours, we built the plan. Every crate location, every warehouse mapped on the wall. Ryder had already hacked into Red Axis comms through burner frequencies, encrypted, but sloppy. He patched the feed through a speaker. Static hissed, then a man's voice broke through. "Creed wants the shipment rerouted through Fort Remnant. He's expecting the ghost to follow the wrong trail." Fort Remnant. My old training base, abandoned, but still full of hidden tunnels and forgotten munitions. Creed wasn't just baiting me anymore. He was writing the next chapter himself. Victor grinned, sharp and dangerous. "Guess he forgot the wolves know those tunnels better than he does." I looked at each of them in turn. No unnecessary kills. We go in quiet. We dismantle his operation, find proof, bring it to the military court. I want this legally burned, not buried. Blake raised an eyebrow. "Legal? Since when do ghosts believe in courts?" I stared at the map. "Since I realized vengeance dies fast. But justice leaves a scar they can see forever." That night, I made one last stop before the mission, Evan's grave. The cemetery was quiet, wind sighing through dry leaves. I placed my son's school badge on the stone. "When I was your age," I whispered, "I thought strength meant surviving what others couldn't. Now I know it's forgiving what they never will." I stood there a long time, breathing in the cold, until headlights cut across the edge of the field. Lila's car. She stepped out, wrapped in my old jacket. "You think walking away from me keeps me safe?" she said softly. "It keeps you alive," I replied. Her voice cracked. "You're going after him." "Yes. And if you die, it'll be for the right reason this time." She looked down, something trembling behind her eyes. "I told Mason where to find you once. I won't let that be the last thing I ever did." I tilted my head, confused. "I went to the police," she said quietly. "I gave them everything, messages, calls, accounts. They're tracking him too. You'll have allies from the inside." For the first time in days, I felt something other than rage. "You did good." Tears ran down her cheeks. "Please come back." I cupped her face gently. "If I don't tell him I tried to be better." Back at the safe house, the team prepped their gear. Quiet focus, military muscle memory. Ryder checked his blades. Victor packed charges. Blake loaded data drives. Colin cleaned his rifle with surgical calm. Ryder looked up. "Fort Remnant's 40 miles out. We go tonight." I nodded. "Creed thinks he's drawing me into the open. Let's make him think he's right." Victor smirked. "You ready for this, boss?" I strapped on my old vest, the fabric smelling faintly of sand and smoke. I was born ready for this. We drove through the night, for black trucks cutting through the highway like shadows. The stars above looked cold and distant, just like the ones I used to stare at from foreign soil. For the first time since Evan's death, my heartbeat felt steady again. The old instincts had returned, sharp and precise. This wasn't about a burned house anymore. It was about closing a chapter too many men had left open. As the base came into view, its old guard towers silhouetted in the moonlight, I whispered to myself, "Let's end this where it all began, Mason." What I didn't see, parked half a mile away under black tarp, were 3 of Mason's trucks waiting, engines cold, guns loaded. He already knew we were coming. Part 6. The quiet storm. The drive to Fort Remnant was silent. Each mile of cracked asphalt tightened the air in the truck. This was where it began for most of us. The drills, the silence, the ghosts. Now we were coming back as the men the place had built and forgotten. Victor killed the headlights as the road disappeared into forest. Half a click out. No movement on thermal. Ryder scanned the darkness. They'll be inside. Someone always guards their pride. I looked ahead at the outline of the old base. Collapsed roofs, rusted towers, a nervous moonlight cutting along the fence. Every instinct screamed that Mason wanted this exact picture in my head. He lured me here because he knew I'd come. I just didn't care anymore. We cut through the fence near the drainage tunnel. I moved first, the others falling into formation, a pattern burned into our bones. Inside, dust crunched under boots, the air sharp with the rot of old gun oil and rainwater. "Ryder," I whispered, "check the south wing." He nodded and vanished into shadow. Blake knelt beside an old power conduit humming faintly. He rerouted current. "Someone's using the grid again." "Then he's here," I said. Victor grinned. "Good. Saves us gas." We crossed into the main barracks. A single lantern glowed at the far end of the hall, its flames steady. A table was set beneath it, 5 dog tags laid out in a line. Mine was one of them. Blake muttered, "He's not just hunting you. He's staging a funeral." From somewhere in the darkness, a voice echoed through an intercom. Calm, confident, familiar. "Welcome home, Ghost. How's the family?" My stomach turned cold. "Mason," I called out. "Show yourself. We'll get there. But first, a game. You always liked puzzles." A door slammed open down the hall. Victor swung his rifle. A shadow darted across the doorway, small, fast. 2 shots burst, ricocheting metal. Silence followed. Ryder's voice crackled over comms. "They're flanking. 3 hostiles northeast corridor. Take them," I ordered. Gunfire rolled through the concrete belly of the base. The noise built, then faded back into nothing but heartbeat and breath. "Clear," Ryder reported. Only then did I notice the letter slipped under the dog tags. I tore it open. A single line written in Mason's precise script. "She wasn't loyal to you either. Ask Blake what his real orders were." My eyes lifted to him. Blake froze. "Grant, don't. What is this?" He hesitated. "After Riyadh, when you disappeared, Command told me if you ever resurfaced, I was to report it. You had too many secrets. They didn't trust that you'd stay buried. You sold me out. I was following orders," he said quietly, "until they killed your son. Then I came to finish this, for both of us." Rage hit fast, but duty held me steady. "We finish it, then we settle ours." We moved deeper into the base. The rooms grew narrower, shadows thicker. Mason's voice followed us through the old speakers, like he lived in the walls. "You built your life on lies, Grant. A false home, a false peace. Did you ever tell her what Riyadh really cost?" "Don't listen," Victor hissed. "He wants your head clouded." But I did listen, because every word Mason spoke carried a memory I couldn't shake. Flames, shouts, the field turned to glass. "That boy wasn't supposed to be yours. Lila reached out to me before you married her. Did she tell you that?" Blake slammed his fist into a wall. "Cut the feed." I stopped him. "No," my voice came out flat. "Let him talk." The intercom clicked once, twice, then his laughter filled the room. See you at the heart of the fort, Ghost. Bring what's left of your conscience. Ryder signaled. Central Tower's heat signature just spiked. That's him, I said. We ended. The path to the tower was lined with dim red emergency lights. Mason must have powered himself. The air carried the scent of burning cordite and oil, fresh. He'd been waiting here since the first body hit the ground weeks ago. We reached the metal stairwell. The sound of boots clanging echoed, then gunfire. Colin's rifle cracked once, twice, dropping 2 figures. 3 left, he yelled. I moved fast, the others covering behind me. We breached the top floor, an open command room stripped of everything but maps. A laptop played security feeds showing my burned house, Evan's grave, our broken lives replaying on loop. And then, across the room, he stepped from behind the screens. Mason Creed. Older. Scarred. Same eyes. The eyes that once steadied me through desert firefights, now cold as ash. He smiled. You look tired, Ghost. You killed my son. He tilted his head. You killed my life. Difference is, you got medals for it. Victor leveled his rifle. Drop it, Creed. Mason raised his hand slowly. You think this ends with me dead? You think I didn't plan for every bullet in your chambers? He pressed a small detonator against his chest harness. Last lesson, Ghost, he said. Control is an illusion. Before I could move, the first explosion hit the southern wing. The entire tower shook, fire spilling through shattered glass. Blake grabbed the laptop. I yanked Mason forward, slamming him to the ground as the ceiling tiles rained fire. He coughed blood and laughed. See you soon, brother. Then he pressed the trigger. A blinding flash swallowed everything. When the smoke cleared, I was on my back in the dirt outside the fort. Victor was dragging Blake out of the rubble. The tower burned behind us like Judgment Day itself. Ryder shouted. We got 1 vehicle inbound. Unknown ID. I turned. Through the flames, a black SUV sped toward us, headlights cutting through smoke. It skidded to a stop, door flung open. Lila stepped out, shaking. She screamed, Grant. He's alive. Mason's alive. He called me from the tunnel. I turned toward the flames just as movement flickered under the collapsed concrete. Someone crawling through fire, still breathing. This wasn't over. Not even close. Part 7, Blood Oath smoke still rolled across the hills behind Fort Remnant when we regrouped at the edge of the forest. Everyone was coughing, faces streaked with soot. The tower had collapsed, but no one believed Mason Creed was gone. He'd slipped through too many traps to die that easy. Blake leaned on the truck fender, wrapping a strip of gauze around his arm. He had tunnels, he croaked. Old maintenance shafts under the base. He's using them to move gear. Then he's still under our feet, I said. And I'm done chasing ghosts. Ryder pointed toward the dark tree line. Someone's coming. We raised weapons until a lone figure stumbled from the smoke. One of the Iron Vulture's kids, maybe 19, burned across one side of his jacket. He dropped to his knees, hands raised. Don't shoot. Please. He left me here. I grabbed him by the collar and dragged him into the open. His eyes were wide, pupils trembling with shock. Where's Mason Creed? He coughed. Down in the tunnels. Said we were just bait. Said nobody leaves alive. Name? Ty, he whispered. Ty Brooks. Victor hauled him upright. He's the same punk we saw near the school footage. Ty looked straight at me. I didn't know it was your kid, man. He told us it was a message job, just vandalism. He said nobody was gonna die. I shoved him against the truck. He poured gasoline on a child. Ty started shaking. It was Colt. He lit it. I swear I tried to stop him. Creed paid us to scare you. That's all. Said your past would kill itself if we hit where it hurt. I stared into his eyes and saw something real. Panic, maybe guilt. You're going to show me those tunnels. An hour later, we were moving through a gash in the hillside that stank of diesel and metal. Victor carried the light. Ryder kept point, silent as smoke. Ty led us down through concrete tunnels lined with graffiti and half-empty crates stamped RAG, Red Axis Global. The kid whispered as he walked. He's got a safe room deeper in. Calls it the pit. Keeps everything there. Files, money, leverage. At a junction, Ryder froze. Motion sensors. New. I looked at Ty. Where's the kill switch? He pointed to a small metallic box on the wall. Red wire, then blue. Victor cut them fast, sweat beading on his temple until the LED blinked dead. We moved another 50 yards before voices floated toward us. Creed wants samples moved tonight. And the woman? He said bring her. I mouthed the words to Blake. Lila. He nodded once, face grim. I raised my hand. On my signal. We hit them quick. 2 guards down before they even reached for rifles. The third swung his pistol. Ryder dropped him with a single burst. The corridor beyond opened into a wide bunker. The first thing I saw was a glass wall, and behind it, Lila, handcuffed to a chair, bruised but alive. Mason's voice rolled out over the speakers again. You just don't stop, do you? He stepped from the far shadows, calm as ever, headset gleaming from the glow of monitors. Let her go, I said. He smiled. She made her choice, same as you. Everyone did. Lila's voice cracked through the intercom. Grant, he's lying. No, he isn't. Mason cut in, his tone almost tender. You remember Riyadh? The orphanage compound you leveled because command said it housed weapons? 20 civilians burned alive, families. Lila was there as a relief medic. She saw what you did. That's how we met. The floor felt like it tilted beneath me. No. She reached out years later because you were never supposed to know. She wanted forgiveness. I wanted proof that monsters hide behind metals. Lila's eyes were wild behind the glass. I tried to stop him. I tried, for Evan. Mason tilted his head. You see, Ghost, this story never had heroes. Only deaths. Ryder whispered, orders? Lock the exits, I muttered. Before Mason could react, Victor lobbed a flashbang through the doorway. White light swallowed the room. I crashed through the haze, tackled Mason across the floor, and slammed him into the wall. You talk about debts? I growled. Here's mine. He spit blood, still smiling. Too late. I already paid it in fire. I glanced toward the monitors. Explosives, armed timers ticking across half the screens. He'd wired the tunnels to blow. Disarm team now. Blake yelled. Victor and Ryder sprinted to the panels, cutting lines as sparks hissed. I dragged Mason upright and slammed him against the glass, separating Lila. Tell me how to stop it. He whispered in my ear, almost laughing. You can't. Only one charge matters, the one under your wife's chair. Then he bit down hard on something metal between his teeth. A burst of blood, and he went limp, cyanide capsule. I let him drop. Grant, Victor shouted. 12 seconds left. I shot the handcuffs off Lila's wrists, grabbed her, and ran. The others followed through smoke and debris as fire chased us down the tunnel. The explosion hit behind us. Heat, noise, dust all at once. The blast threw us into the dirt outside. When the ringing finally faded, night had swallowed the sky. Parts of the hillside were gone. The tunnel collapsed. Mason Creed's body was buried somewhere in that inferno. Lila lay beside me, coughing, shaking. It's over. I looked at the rising flames. No, I said quietly. Pieces like him don't just burn. They rot first. Blake sat down beside us, wiping grime from his face. You think he had backups? He always had backups, I answered. And we just gave him a new story to tell. For the first time since Evan's death, I saw dawn creeping over the tree-line, thin and gray. I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd finally broken the chain. Then the phone in my pocket buzzed. Unknown number. One message. Not done until the boy's name is cleared. MC. I stared at the screen, the letters blurring into smoke. Mason Creed was somewhere out there, breathing my air again. And the war wasn't finished. Part 8. Collapse of the Vultures by Sunrise. I finally understood what Mason really wanted. Death wasn't his goal, disgrace was. He wanted my life to end the way his had started, alone, distrusted, nameless in the shadows. But I wasn't the same soldier he remembered. He taught me how to build ghosts. Now I'd use those lessons against him. We buried what was left of the tunnel, then drove to an abandoned motel on the highway's edge. Blake patched into Red Axis's encrypted network while Victor stood guard by the window, rifle steady. Ryder was sorting through hard drives salvaged from the bunker, half melted, but readable enough to trace money routes. Lines of code scrolled across the laptop. Blake muttered, "This isn't just Creed's operation. He sold Red Axis tech to street gangs nationwide. The Iron Vultures were just a test batch. Recruit, brainwash, deploy. Then we collapsed the machine," I said. "Every account, every route." Ryder looked over. "You're talking total blackout?" "I'm talking justice," I said. "The kind governments will never sign for." 2 hours later, the motel became our war room. Every surviving contact I had from the old unit came online through secure relay, the kind of men who'd vanished off record long ago. Victor pinned map sheets to the walls. We hit their core hubs simultaneously. Supply, comms, civilian fronts. Once the funding dies, Mason's shield evaporates. Blake typed faster, sweat running down his temple. "I can spoof their signature and flood their servers. It'll look like Creed's own people hacked them. By the time they sort it, they'll be too busy killing each other." Lila sat quietly in the corner, wrapped in a blanket. She hadn't spoken much since the explosion. Her eyes followed our movements like she wasn't sure whether to trust me again. Finally, she said, "If you do this, they'll know it came from Mason's circle. They'll hunt everything he ever touched, including me." I met her eyes. "Then you disappear. Tonight." Her voice broke. "Grant, I can't keep running." "Yes, you can," I said gently. "Because you must." She looked down, then whispered, "He's right. When this ends, none of us gets to win." Maybe she was right. But the boy we lost deserved peace, not headlines. By dusk, it was in motion. Victor loaded 2 vans with false transmitter rigs. Ryder's drones hovered above the outer perimeter, scanning for Red Axis patrols. Lila drove away in Blake's spare SUV, tears in her eyes, the road swallowing her taillights. When she disappeared over the ridge, I turned to the team. "Once we start, there's no undoing this." Blake smirked faintly. "Wouldn't have come if there was." He hit enter. The network storm began. Inside the motel, computer fans howled as ghost data stormed Red Axis's system. Millions of false messages, coordinates, hit contracts, all pointing back to Mason Creed's top lieutenants. Victor watched through binoculars. "They're moving already. Convoys leaving warehouses. Must think they've been betrayed." Miles away, gunfire started, small at first, then sweeping across the radio bands like wildfire. Creed's empire was turning on itself. Ryder checked his feed. Iron Vulture's chatter is chaos. Some believe Creed sold them out. Others think the feds are burning their name. "Perfect," I said. "Let them eat each other." But victory has a cost you feel in the quiet between explosions. When the last radio signal cut off, all I heard was the wind pushing through broken windows. Blake stared at the screen, voice low. "Incoming call." Same scramble Mason used before. I answered. The audio cracked to life, faint breathing on the other side. "You think killing pawns buries the king?" Mason's voice was calm, almost amused. "You just burned 1,000 bodies to keep your soul clean. Your empire deserved it. My empire was yours first. You trained those kids through the programs you helped design. They just changed names." I slammed my fist into the table. "Stop hiding behind ghosts, Mason." "I'm done hiding. There's a file on drive 6B from your bunker. Open it." Blake hesitated, then clicked. The screen filled with photos, official contracts, transfer routes, signatures. One of them was mine. The file showed that the original youth recruit outreach I designed years ago for counter-gang rehabilitation had been repurposed directly into Red Axis testing. Mason didn't create the monster. I had. He whispered, "You built the fire, Grant. I just poured the gas." Then the line died. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Victor finally muttered, doesn't change what he did. No, I said, but it changes what I thought I was. I looked over at the maps, the tangled lines of targets, the red pins marking every city infected by our own tactics. Revenge felt too small now. This wasn't just Mason's disease, it was ours. Blake said quietly. He's heading for something called the Foundry. Last traceable ping from his signal. Military site repurposed for private defense. Ryder loaded his rifle. Then that's where this ends. We left the motel before midnight. The city behind us glowed with chaos. Gangs scattering. Explosions marking where the iron vultures turned on each other. By the time sunrise hit, their mark was ash. As we drove, Victor said, "They'll tell stories about this. Whole networks collapsing overnight." "Let them," I said, "as long as it keeps kids from burning at school gates again." Ryder glanced at me. "We going to the Foundry now?" I nodded. "Creed's last sanctuary. Once we pull him out, we finish it clean." Blake checked the GPS tracker. A faint dot pulsed red on the map. "He's expecting us. Might even want this to end with cameras. You ready for that kind of light?" I stared at the horizon, the first trace of dawn cutting through the haze. "Ready or not," I said, "this ends where it should have ended years ago." As the road curved toward the dark silhouette of the Foundry, the wind carried distant sirens, echoes of a war we both started and could no longer stop. Part 9. Fort Remnant. The Foundry rose from the valley like a scar, concrete and rust swallowing the morning light. It had once built weapons for our wars. Now it was the fortress for the one that never ended. We parked a quarter-mile out and went in on foot. Victor and Ryder flanked the fence, cutting through coils of barbed wire while Blake monitored heat scans on a tablet. The whole building pulsed with faint energy signatures, generators humming under the floor. I whispered, "He's powered the whole site. That means defense systems online." Blake nodded. "If we trip a single line, everyone in there will know." We moved through tall weeds until the ground turned to metal grating. The air smelled of iron and rain, thick and cold. Inside, the Foundry echoed with grinding machinery. Distant voices, Mason's men, maybe a dozen. They carried assault rifles, but no discipline. Mercenaries paid to keep breathing. Ryder slid between pillars, counted steps, and murmured, "For left corridor. 2 by the conveyors." "Take the pair," I said. He vanished like smoke. By the time we reached the central floor, 2 faint thuds signaled the end of that conversation. Victor pointed toward a stairwell that spiraled to the upper platform. "He'll be up there. Wants you to crawl to him." I smirked faintly. "Then let's walk." On the catwalk, the world narrowed to the thud of boots and the weight of everything that brought me here. Evan, Lila, every face from my past. The railing was slick with dust. Halfway up, loudspeakers cracked alive. "You always like dramatics, Ghost. Come home, and I'll end this clean." Mason's voice. Calm. Measured. Dangerous. "Keep him talking," Blake whispered. "Tell me," Mason continued, "when they handed you medals for correcting the uncorrectable, did you ever ask what it really fixed? Or were you too busy burying evidence?" I raised the mic on my collar. "You turned a vendetta into genocide, Creed. That's what you fixed." His laughter rolled through the vents. "You think this is about vengeance? It's about showing the machine what its heroes really are." When we reached the top platform, a blast door waited half open. Beyond it, light, movement. I heard music playing low from ancient speakers, some old instrumental piece full of static. Victor nodded, ready to breach. "On my mark," I whispered. We moved fast, flashbang first, weapons second. The explosion lit the room white, and we poured through the door. Mason was there, standing between control panels, weapon at his side. He didn't flinch. Around him stood 4 remaining guards, rifles trembling in nervous hands. He smiled at me like at an old friend. Always the hero's entrance. I aimed straight at his chest. "Drop the weapon." He didn't. Instead, he signaled his guards. "Leave us." They hesitated. Now, one by one they backed away, disappearing down the outer corridor. The moment they were gone, he turned back to me. This is between us anyway. The silence stretched till my pulse was the only sound. He tapped a file drive on the table. Everything I built, everything you helped create, it's all here. Proof that we were never soldiers, just instruments. You can't kill that truth. I took a step closer. You killed a child for it. Mason's jaw tightened. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw regret. Then it was gone. I wanted you broken, and you are. Look at you, hunting redemption from a dead system. You call that redemption? I asked. I call it cleanup. He moved suddenly, weapon flashing up. We fired at the same time. My bullet tore into his shoulder. His shot ripped through the railing behind me. Pain ripped through his face, but he laughed. Still faster than me. Victor rushed in, gun raised. Mason waved his good hand weakly. Don't bother, old friend. This part's mine. He staggered to the edge of the platform. Flames from the lower furnaces painted him in orange light. You burn me, he said. You confirm everything they think about you. I lowered my gun. Then tell me why, Mason. He coughed hard, blood spilling between his teeth. Because no one remembers the ones left behind. His hand moved to his vest pocket, another detonator. They will now. I lunged. The flash seared my vision, the blast throwing me backward into Victor. Metal screamed as the floor split open. Heat roared up the walls. When I came to, the foundry was burning from the inside out. Mason's body was gone, swallowed by the fire or escaped. I couldn't tell. Blake pulled me to my feet. We have to move. The whole structure's collapsing. We stumbled toward daylight, choking on smoke. Outside, Ryder helped us into the truck. The sky behind us was red, a column of fire marking the end of something too big to name. As we drove, I watched the flames fade in the mirror. Part of me hoped Mason was finally dead. The other part knew men like him didn't die. They lingered in systems, files, stories told by those who'd never know what really happened. Victor said quietly, "You think it's over?" I stared ahead, voice barely more than a whisper. Not until someone tells the truth. The sky above the ruined foundry looked bruised, heavy with smoke and sunrise. Flames had eaten through the far wing during the night, leaving only twisted iron and silence. I stood there longer than I should have, palms burned, watching the wreckage settle into stillness. Mason Creed was gone. Dead, maybe, or carried off by the chaos he created. It didn't matter anymore. The noise stopped, and for the first time in months, so did the part of me that kept shaking. Victor limped over, dragging a half-melted duffel bag. No sign of survivors. Not even him. I nodded. Good. Let the ghosts bury themselves. Ryder and Blake were by the trucks, patching up wounds with torn towels and duct tape. The smoke made everyone look older. Blake said quietly, "Whole grid's offline. No one will ever know what really went down here." "That's fine," I answered. Some truths don't belong in headlines. 3 days later, we scattered. Ryder disappeared back into the mountains. Victor took a job training rescue units. And Blake stayed behind to scrub our names from every database like we'd never existed. One by one, the comms went silent. No goodbyes, just men fading into the static where they always belonged. I rented a small place near the northern coast, a single-room shack where the ocean wind smelled cleaner than anything I'd breathed since the war. No weapons, no uniforms, just time. But guilt has a way of finding cracks in peace. Every night, I saw Evan's face in the smoke. Every morning, I heard Lila's voice echoing. I didn't think he'd actually do it. I thought revenge would close the wound, but it only taught me how deep it really ran. A month later, a letter arrived. No stamp, no name. Inside, a photograph of Evan's grave, freshly cleaned. Beside it sat a jar of wildflowers and an inscription scribbled across the bottom. He deserved better. We all did. Lila's handwriting. She was alive and safe somewhere far away under an invented life. I read that note a dozen times before tucking it into my chest pocket. For once, the ache felt gentler. She'd done what I couldn't, learned to live again. That evening, I drove to the small cemetery outside town. I placed my unit's emblem on Evan's headstone, the metal cold against my fingers. You know, I whispered, you were braver than me. You walked into the world believing it could be kind. I only ever saw the part that bites back. A soft wind moved through the trees. In the distance, I could hear laughter from a park, the sound of children alive, ordinary, untouched by fire. It hit me harder than any battlefield ever did. Weeks turned into months. The Foundry case disappeared from the news. Red Axis was wiped from government records like they'd never existed. One night, while filing old gear into storage, I found the burned dog tag Mason had sent before the end. Heat had erased half the name, but the numbers still glinted faintly. I threw it into the ocean the next morning and watched it sink until the water stopped rippling. Still, the quiet never truly came. I started using the restlessness differently, helping veterans find missing families, finding shelter for kids recruited by old gangs that used to worship the Vulture's name. They didn't know who I was. I didn't tell them. Some ghosts help best when they stay invisible. One rainy evening, two boys walked into the center needing food. Their faces reminded me of Evan, skinny, scared, desperate to be seen. They'd run away from a group that promised them power in exchange for loyalty. We just wanted to belong, one said. I knelt in front of them. Then belong somewhere that makes you better, not emptier. They nodded, clutching the sandwiches I handed them. I watched them eat and felt something settle inside me, like purpose, not punishment. Maybe this was what Evan would have wanted for me all along. Another month passed. The radio one morning mentioned a string of anonymous donations funding youth rehabilitation in cities once infected by Red Axis influence. The foundation's name made me stop breathing for a second. Evan's Light Initiative. I hadn't started it, but someone had. Maybe Lila. Maybe even Blake moving strings behind the curtain. Whoever did, they carried the promise I'd whispered over that grave. And that was enough. A year later, no, not a year later. Time doesn't heal in neat numbers. It just keeps moving until one day you realize the silence doesn't hurt quite as much. I stood on a pier that morning watching the sun melt over the ocean. My reflection didn't look like a soldier anymore, just a man who'd finally stopped running from the fire he carried everywhere he went. I heard footsteps behind me. Blake's voice, half amused, half tired. Could have guessed you'd end up near the water. You find peace where it sounds different, I said. He handed me a small flash drive. Last of Mason's files. Everything about Red Axis, wiped except one folder labeled Legacy of Fire. You want me to toss it? I looked at the drive, its surface reflecting the sunrise. No, keep it. Let the truth sleep, but make sure someone remembers it existed. Blake nodded, slipped it back into his pocket, and walked away without another word. When he was gone, I sat there listening to the surf until the horizon blurred. For the first time in forever, I whispered Evan's name without it breaking me. Sometimes closure isn't a clean ending. It's waking up, breathing quietly, and realizing you survived the one thing you thought would finish you. I wasn't a hero or a killer seeking redemption. I was just a father who learned what forgiveness costs and what peace tastes like when you finally earn it. And that's where the story truly ends, right where fire turns back into light. Before you go, I want to ask you something important. When revenge finally finds its end, what stays behind? The ashes or the people who rise from them? Tell me your thoughts down below. I love reading what you feel after each story. Every comment tells me why I keep writing these nights into something worth remembering. If this story touched you even a little, tap that like softly. It means more than you think. Hit subscribe if you want to ride with me again into the next thrilling, emotional, epic revenge story that's already waiting to breathe. And tell me in the comments what kind of stories you love most. Betrayal between family, special forces revenge, forbidden secrets, quiet heartbreaks. I'll bring you the one you're craving next, written for the scars only you know. Until we meet again in another storm, another fire, another story. Take care of your heart and keep it human.